I want to welcome everyone to the Live Well Kalkaska Substance Free Coalition's Coffee with the Coalition Forum. This is an open and informal discussion about substance use disorders and related topics and concerns within the Kalkaska community and Northern Michigan. Today's discussion is about sex trafficking. So we're going to do some introduction. So if everybody could introduce yourself. I'm Suzanne Prentice. I'm the coordinator of the Live Well Kalkaska Substance Free Coalition. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren Reed, and I'm the coordinator of the Grand Traverse County Drug Free Coalition.
And Tim?
Hi, I'm Tim Hudson. I'm a behavioral health consultant with University of Michigan's Michigan Opioid Collaborative. I cover the northern 21 counties.
All right. And I will introduce Linda. We'd like to welcome Linda Salm. She's a prevention specialist with Catholic Human Services Up North Prevention and the co-founder and former president and executive director of Citizens Against Sex Trafficking TC. And she's going to talk about the social stigma of sex trafficking, what sex trafficking looks like in our culture, and its connection to substance use and trafficking. So go ahead, Linda.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for that introduction. And I'll just give a little bit of background, and then I have a presentation with PowerPoint for you all. Just kind of show you how that fits into a logic model for our communities. I did start in 2014 and co-founded a nonprofit, Citizens Against Sex Trafficking, Traverse City. And we worked within the community, and we did movie showings, trainings, a gala event at Dennis Museum, just creating awareness about what this problem was and what it looks like. Because prior to that, I knew nothing about it really. My daughter had taken a trip to Thailand, and she worked in a safe house there when she was 17 years old. And some of the stories she told me, not only did it change her life, but it impacted mine to hear really what sex trafficking was and how early and just what it was like in that culture, because they start with children. And that is viewed a good thing when your child will go to a sex trafficker and that provides for the family. But knowing that, that was over there, not here. So a few years later, I saw the movie Nefarious, and that just opened my eyes to not only how it's done in the world and in different countries, but how that happens in our country. So at first I thought, okay, when I start talking about this, am I going to lose all my friends? Who talks about sex trafficking? And this was, you know, almost 10 years ago. So a lot has changed, and it has become a part of the discussion, which was one of our first goals, was to make it part of our discussion. So today I'm going to just cover things about what it looks like, how we can see it and recognize it, and what the stigma is surrounding traffic victims and survivors. So do I just hit my share screen right now, Suzanne? And then, all right, here we go. Oh, wait, what's this? Like, do I do that? There we go.
Yep, there you go.
Now, is there a little trick to get rid of my thing over here? Or should I just go on with it?
You want to go to view, and then you'll want to go into presentation mode.
Fit to window.
Let's see.
Yep.
Or you might be able to click on that icon at the top left that's to the right of the little circle arrow thing.
The other thing you can do is if you click on slideshow and just put start from the beginning. And then you just click the screen each time you want to move to the next slide.
Like over here, the slideshow. No,
I'm sorry, the
tab
two over to the
slideshow.
left of that. The one to your left says review, and the one to the left of that says slideshow.
Oh, yeah, I see. Gotcha.
And then just go
From beginning?
From beginning. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
All right.
Hmm.
And then I click, okay, there we go. All right, very good. Thank you for that. This is new to me on Zoom. So, first of all, sex trafficking, it's a booming industry. What makes it a booming industry? Sex trafficking and a commercialized sex act, those go together. And just to explain a little bit about that, sex trafficking has three elements that is always present. The use of force, fraud, and coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult. And the definition for coercion, fraud, and force is what's really key in identifying that. Coercion is persuading someone to do something by using force or threats. And fraud is wrongful deception to result in financial or personal gain. And something like that might be, hey, come with me. I will give you an education and educational opportunities. Or this modeling job you want, I can get you this modeling job. And so they go along with that and find out that's not at all what's at the end of that interaction. And force is coercion or compulsion with use or threat of violence. And you'll notice that this doesn't have anything to do with crossing county lines or not crossing county lines. Trafficking is not smuggling. And that is the difference between smuggling and trafficking. Trafficking will have those three elements involved. If a child is involved, it is automatically sex trafficking. There's no exceptions. And that's because for any child to perform a commercial sex act, they have been coerced to do it. A commercialized sex act is prostitution, pornography, and sexual performance done in exchange for any item of value. So I typically stay away from the word prostitution because that has a stigma connotated with it just by virtue of its name. But that's to give clarification of what sex trafficking is and how we understand it and how we are kind of shifting that part of the conversation. Any item of value can include money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothes. There used to be a time when it would be like, well, was their money exchanged? Money doesn't have to be exchanged. If they're given drugs, if they're being given food or clothes, sometimes an identifying factor would be a teenager that didn't wear that well, was not that well dressed, and all of a sudden she's coming to school with really nice high heels and Coach handbags and things like that. That would be kind of a red flag as to what that change might be in her life that brought that around. It thrives because of the serious demand that drives it. A buyer fuels the market with their money. Michigan ranked in the top 10 states for human trafficking in 2019 with 364 cases, according to the Polaris Project, which operates the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline. The Michigan Abolitionist Project, which works to end trafficking, estimates that the actual numbers are closer to 1,100 to 1,400 individuals. And that just came out September 10th, 2021. So that is actually a more updated statistic. A trafficker exploits victims to earn the revenue from the selling of a person as a commodity. So according to the International Labor Organization, 2/3 of the estimated total of 150 billion or US 99 billion come from commercial sexual exploitation. So it definitely is here. It's definitely a big business, and it's definitely something we need to be made aware of and see how that crosses our path and in some of the work that we do. There's more money to be made by selling a person 10 times in a night than one drug. So a pimp or a dealer or trafficker, they can get themselves a girl or a group of girls out there working, and they've got 10 turns a night. They're making way more money than their one drug deal that will not reappear for another few days or weeks. So a victim can be male or female or a child, and they are bought and sold for profit. And payment can be in the form of drugs, keeping victims in the cycle when they did not choose it for themselves. And that's the main thing to keep in mind as well, that a lot of these substance use disorders and situations that we see, there can be a backstory because they get connected to the drugs and where they are addicted to the drugs, and they keep coming back for more, and they also feel like that's the only place they can get it is from this person who started them. Trafficking in Michigan, and this is a story of Teresa Flores, and she's written a book, The Slave Across the Street, and she actually was 14 years old and trafficked in a high school in Birmingham, Michigan, and nobody knew it. She came from an affluent family. She lived in an affluent neighborhood. And back then, they would have like two sides to their house. So her brother was on that side, she was on that side, had her own bedroom, had her own TV, had her own telephone. And she came across a guy that she had a crush on, and he invited or said he would drive her home from school. Instead, invited her to his home, gave her something to drink, and then had sex with her while it was being recorded by his cousins. And so when she came to, he was able to say, well, we've got these pictures, and this is what we need you to do, and you need to do whatever we ask of you. So they would call in the middle of the night and pick her up 2, 3, 4 times a week. And she would be sold. They'd take her someplace. She'd be sold all night long, and then she'd be returned home in time to go to school. So she went from being an A student, a cheerleader, had a boyfriend from a youth group that they were going to get married someday, to being sex trafficked, and nobody knew that. And she started to show bad grades at school. She was missing, skipping school, different things. So there was a huge change in her life with that. She also had a time where when she tried to get out, they came and stole her dog and then called her so that she could hear the dog barking in the background to force her into remaining with them. So she is one of our most standout testimonies of somebody that is coming from an unexpected background and an unexpected source. So why Michigan? Why is Michigan such a draw for sex trafficking? It is, I think there's some statistics coming up, but well, I'll wait for that to come up to say, but I know that overall we rate 22nd in the nation. So in some respects, that's better than what it was, but in other respects, we have a long ways to go. Michigan has several factors that make it more susceptible to trafficking. For one, Michigan is connected to an international border, Canada, and we have a lot of good highways, and so that makes in and out of the state quick and discreet. A lot of local trafficking truck stops on the highways in which runaway children are picked up. And most of the trafficking cases come from Detroit, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Mackinac Island. And this information comes from National Human Trafficking Resource Center by the Polaris Project. And a lot of this is taken also by the calls that come in. Grand Rapids was the #2 city in the nation back in 2014 and 15. So we have made some gains, I would say, but at the same time, we are definitely a key state of interest for this particular trafficking, whatever you want to call them, trafficking people and network. Traffickers use techniques to ensure compliance and meet demands: fear, violence, intimidation, threats. Some of that was, as I outlined, with Teresa Flores. I don't know if any of you heard more recently, there was a news report of a young boy, I want to say in the teenage years, and he had been sexting, and then he committed suicide. Many times what's behind that sexting is a trafficker, and they get them to do this on their phones and what have you, and then they use that as threats an intimidation. We're going to give this to your parents. We're going to give this to your principal. So there's a whole new avenue that this is happening. There is a group out of Grand Rapids called WAR, which is a Women at Risk. And they also have a warning light that's closely affiliated with them. They are on Facebook, and they do a lot that shows what the kids are coming up against, what's online, what some of the apps are, what's on their phones. One thing that is often said that I think is really a good thing to kind of think about, if not pass along, but would you let a strange man into your child's bedroom in the middle of the night? And of course, the answer is probably going to be no. Well, that's what you do every time you let your child take their phone into their bedroom, because they can just pick up that phone and be online, and you don't know what kind of strangers and what's being said and what kind of grooming could be happening. So that's a whole nother subject on its own, and I think of great interest. So the stigma that comes around this is that society may call human trafficking prostitution, but federal law calls it sex trafficking. And when I first started, it was all about prostitutes. Well, since they're being forced and coerced and threatened to do what they do, they're being trafficked. It isn't their choice, so they are trafficked victims. Now, they don't look at themselves as trafficked victims, but they do consider themselves survivors. So there's a little change in vocabulary with that, from victims to survivors, because if they reach out and they want some help, they're survivors. And if they're really trying to get a new life and put the past behind them, they're survivors. So we need to applaud them and affirm them in that. The victims need help, not judgment or punishment. So there's a little bit of a shift that is happening in how we think of it, how we look at it, and I think even how we can be more effective in helping them. And because of the social stigma or misinformation, victims are usually unidentified. So they are silenced by fear and control of the trafficker. So many times they'll be looking at their phone, looking over their shoulder. They can leave a grocery store and their trafficker will be out there to make them go with them or force them to the next thing. So it's important to see that some of these behaviors and things, and we might even see this along in the work that we do, is there a backstory? Is there something that's really prodding them in that direction that they wouldn't have normally chosen? One of the things that they do is once they're addicted to drugs, many times with the substance use disorders, they go back to their trafficker because they need that next hit, or they need that supply that they can't live without. So what we might kind of look at as, why isn't she accepting the help, or why isn't he coming along with us on this? Many times it's because of the fear. And I think that fear is something we don't necessarily have full comprehension of because of the psychological background, that what they've been through with their trafficker. Because of the social stigma, victims are misidentified because they're pigeonholed into treatment for surface issues. And I think we see that somewhat in, say, the hospitals. Basically, if they show up and they're ODing, they're a druggie. Nothing really goes beyond that. What other social services, what other behavioral health, mental care, and opportunities do we have there for this person? So there's a lot of different areas. It's not just hospital, but a lot of different areas where if we can look beyond what the surface issue is, which we are trying to do so much with our mental health. So if we can look behind that and assess that, we can maybe meet the needs a little differently. Since this is reported mainly through self-reporting, statistics are lacking for the full extent of traffic victims. And again, like I mentioned before, they usually do not consider themselves victims. So they're only self-reporting when they really come forward and say that they're being trafficked and they need help with that particular issue. Otherwise, we might not quite see it for what it is. Many times they are overlooked as druggies instead of sex trafficked victims. So how do they find and lure their victims? They find them through social media, home, neighborhoods, clubs or bars, internet, school. And they lure them through promises of protection, love, adventure, home, and opportunity. They promise, I'll take care of you, nobody will hurt you, I love you, we can travel together, or this is, I'm your daddy, so here's your home, this is where you belong, it's with me. And opportunity for the modeling, education, and different things like that would lure them to want to go with this person who supposedly loves and cares for them. At some point, they really believe it. And there's something called the Stockholm Syndrome, which many of you may be familiar with that. And they actually love their abuser. They actually think that's love. So that's also a mental health issue, I think, that intertwines with the victims. The risk and protective factors. The most common age a child enters sex trafficking is 14 to 16 years old. They're too young and naive to realize what's happening, and they have separation from their family. They're separated out from their family. Something that's kind of news for most people is runaways are caught into sex trafficking within 48 hours. So if they aren't found within 48 hours, there's a very good chance they will be caught up into a sex trafficking ring. They have a lack of freedom of identity. Many times they do not have their ID on them. They do not have their driver's license, birth certificate. They can lack education. They don't have a degree. They've never worked. They're homeless. All of those are the risk factors with the human trafficking. So some of the ways that shows up is with substance use disorders, domestic violence, delinquency, teenage pregnancy, STS, and forced abortion. A nurse that was on our board actually had worked down in the hospitals in Southeast Michigan, and they would see their young 13, 14-year-old girls be brought in with no ID, not giving eye contact, no identity on them, and a person doing all the talking for them and having the child go through an abortion, and then they leave. They just get to take them with them. So there's a lot of protective factors that can go into play in a lot of different spheres of influence in our communities. For Michigan, the 2021 report card on child and youth sex trafficking, and this is done by Shared Hope International, and they do a report card on all the states throughout the United States, and we're at an F. So what stood out to me with child and youth sex trafficking, these report cards used to be done with the general population, and we were at about a C. And with the criminal provisions, we're still at a C. But as far as our child and youth and the sex trafficking, the identification and responses to victims are at an F, and the continuum of care is at an F. And access to justice for trafficking survivors are at a D. And tools for victim-centered criminal justice response is an F. And prevention and training is at an F. So there's a lot that can be done in this field as we see how this works together with the work we're already doing. It'd be very nice to see this upgraded the next year or two. So indicators of human trafficking and trauma-informed responses. A victim will avoid eye contact. They'll look malnourished, fatigued, untreated illnesses, injuries. They have no control of money or identification. They have possible signs of physical abuse, restraint, or confinement, evidence of verbal threats, psychological control, and emotional abuse, and constantly monitored, unable to speak for themselves. it begins, so what's a trauma-informed response going to look like? Well, it begins with understanding the physical, social, and emotional impact. Safety is create a trusted space. Trustworthiness, peer support, empowerment, cultural and historical and gender issues, and realize that when they're asked what's wrong, that becomes what happened. So they could shut down even further. So what are some evidence-based interventions that we can offer? Well, first off, a trauma-informed approach is mindful of how to create a situation so the victim feels safe. It empowers him or her to make their own choices. It gives him or her a sense of being understood and validated. Offer immediate assistance and reduce re-traumatization for the victim. Collaborate with organizations and agencies to be aware ahead of time of the services offered within the community. So here's a listing of some of these things and some of the areas that these can be implemented. And some of these things we have in our community, or we are building into our community. We have emergency services, we have crisis intervention, and the new crisis stabilization unit that's being worked on with the Wellness Center, which I think is going to be really key and pivotal for this particular demographic. Emergency shelter, urgent medical care, safety planning, food and clothing, social services, case management, housing, job training and education, transportation, legal services, legal representation, and vacate convictions. That's actually to help somebody who's had prostitution, then they've been arrested for that, and that's on their record. There are laws now on the books to vacate that, so that isn't something they have to wear for the rest of their lives. Emergency shelter, that's a big one, and I've had conversations with some people that can see where that would be so helpful. And so I have here, well, we're going to go back to this in a minute. I wanted to show some of the residential services. These are some websites that can be visited and looked into. I was very excited to come across these as some options. The childwelfare.gov has a really great informational PDF or pamphlet out on different things in reaching that. Also, safehouseproject.org has where they will give grants and they will mentor and they will teach the whole setup for Safe House. So needless to say, I've just come across it, so I will be researching that a little more. But the Sanctum House, the Covenant House are both in Michigan. So in recovery services, this might pertain more. When you come across that, they are a good spot to connect with and maybe be able to get the help and the services that's pertinent to them as a single issue, but that usually comes about after they've had some detox or other counseling services. So I guess this is the bibliography. Whoops, okay. So I am just going to take this down. I'm just going to show the last couple things, Suzanne. This is for more information and comprehensive service referrals. Visit the National Human Trafficking Referral Directory. I've had, with that National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I had one person call me from Traverse City who had a friend who lived in Traverse City but was living in Oregon, and she had a disabled child, and she'd gone missing. And she had certain, prescription drug routine and certain schedule, and she was gone. And of course, the mother was just worried, frantic, and had gone to police, and they couldn't do an Amber Alert. And so at any rate, she had gotten a hold of this friend who got a hold of me, and I gave them that number, and that mother contacted them. And it was probably 3 or 4 days, but they found her in West Virginia. And she was with a trafficker and had been beaten and in pretty bad shape. But they found her, and that's how fast it goes. And that's how well this organization works. So that's a good number to have, just as a reference and a resource. And then the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline, and they have a text number as well. And then there's a runaway switchboard and ISIS. And these are just a few, but I feel it's really great to kind of have that. I have the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline in my phone. So if I ever need it, it's right there in my phone. So on that note, if you'd like to show that video,
Okay, you gotta back out first.
all right, I'm kind of looking where to do that. Can I just close out or?
Let's see, I think you have to unshare. See where you went to share screen?
Yeah, it's not popping up for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see.
Oh, wait, it's probably over here. Sorry, everybody. Ew, I don't know how to get out of this.
Let me see if I can.
Let me see if I can do this a minute. No. Maybe I should go back to home. No.
Oh, here, I can do it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah. I'm gonna share.
So anyway, this video is something that kind of brings it home and what it kind of looks like. And that's why I thought I'd share it today, because there's elements of it that you might not have thought of, that when you see it in real time like this, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I gotta get out of this.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook. Shoot. Let's see. Oh, in the heck, this bar's in the way. There we go. There we go. Can everybody see that and hear it?
You just take a seat. Thank you so much
Yes.
for coming in. I'm Mary, by the way.
Yeah, tonight.
Tonight, nice to meet you. Don't mind the giant microphone.
Yes.
Okay. There are 3 photos in front of you. If you could just pick one, it doesn't really matter which one it is, and show that one to us.
All right.
Could you describe her to us?
She looks youthful. I feel like this is one of those situations where if I say he's 23, then he's actually going to be 16.
Hispanic, maybe not full, but part. Similar to me, actually.
Well, I mean, she's young, so she has a lot of things to look forward to.
I would describe him as friendly.
She looks, happy. She doesn't look shy, but confident.
Anything she puts her mind to, she could achieve.
We actually have his story. If you could read that out loud to us.
Okay, Marcus. I grew up really close to my parents. Adriana. I grew up with my brother and sister.
Amy. I remember watching the Olympics on TV when I was 5 and being totally in awe of the sprinters.
I was the middle child and easily the quietest.
I felt like no one ever saw me or cared. Dad was too drunk to keep a job, and he never even saw me unless I was in his way.
Mom worked 2 jobs to make sure we had food for every meal, so she was never here to know when he would hit us.
One day when I went to the mall, like I like to do to be out of the house, a man came up to me and told me I was beautiful and asked me on a date.
On our first date, he drove me around in his car and said we could eat whatever I wanted. Every time we were together, he bought me something new.
Tom really cared about me, and Tom really made me feel special.
I was in love with him.
After only going out for 3 weeks, Tom offered me a way out of my home, asked me to move in with him.
So when he asked me to have sex with him, I did.
He would put his hand over my face until I couldn't breathe.
Tom had friends over pretty regularly. and I could tell that some of his friends were into me.
So I kept my door locked and hoped that no one would bother me. After a few nights of crashing there, he said that I still owed him for letting me stay at his place.
He said he had a friend who wanted to spend an hour with me. He told me I might have to do some stuff, but not to worry about it. It's not a big deal.
When I didn't want to, he slapped me and said no one ever cared about me like he did.
But I didn't know what else to do because I needed a place to stay.
His friends forced themselves on me and took turns while he watched.
One by one, they'd come down to the basement, telling me how pretty I am.
When they're on top of me, I just close my eyes and pretend I'm running.
I'm exhausted and I don't know what to do.
My name is Adriana, 16 years old.
My name is Marcus. I'm 14 years old. My name is Amy. I'm 12 years old.
I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
That was very different than what I thought. Especially because, like, being a girl and imagining, like, if that was me, like, that's, I don't even know. I can't even imagine what that would be like. She deserves to be a kid, just like what she is in this picture.
It being so close to home is something that makes me want to jump out of this chair.
I wouldn't think that Grand Rapids is a place where anything like this would ever happen.
Because you don't want it to happen to anybody, and you really don't want it to happen to people that live where you live.
Thank you for sharing her story with us. I'd like to show you something if you wouldn't mind taking her picture and following me to the gym.
Oh, wow.
There's no sound.
Suzanne, I think since you muted yourself, turned off the.
In like my
Audio.
world, in my bubble or whatever, we don't talk about this. It's not something we think about.
You know, what we see is only on the surface.
I mean, looking at this, sex trafficking doesn't have any discrimination, that's for sure. Ages, genders, can affect anybody. It hits you right in your heart, your gut, your stomach. It's like, wow. Now it's like I feel like I have this weight of responsibility to see how I can help.
Changes through greater awareness and making people realize that this does happen here and will continue to happen until we decide to make it stop.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Yeah.
That kind of explains a little bit why this is so important to me as well, because Grand Rapids is not that far away. It's actually where I grew up, and it's really what it looks like. And so as we become more aware and we understand what the problem is, we can start to plug into some protective factors and interventions that will help them too. Any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, as far as like Traverse City area, when I went to a conference a few years back, they said that there was high trafficking rates within our own Traverse County.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm not updated. That's one of the things I'm going to start to research and try to get data on. But I do know back I want to say 2013 or 2014, Sheriff Borshevic did do the very first arrest that was done in Leelanau County of a pimp who had 6 girls out in that community. And that was astonishing back then to think of, you know. But thankfully he was on top of that, and he's kind of a leader in this. And so that kind of was part of the beginning cycle of awareness for sex trafficking in our community. For Grand Traverse County, an awareness also grew in the area that when there was a drug bust done, when a girl's over in the corner all beat up and passed out or whatever, it might not be because of drugs. So their whole intake process and how they began to deal with what could be sex trafficking went into place. Grand Traverse County is, our law enforcement is trained in human trafficking, sex trafficking, so they've had a training for that. The state police, the Angel program, a lot of that is really key to that whole piece with transportation and getting help and assistance. So there's been a lot of growth in the last, 7-8 years. But what the actual statistics are, I'm not real sure, but I know Sherry Festival is an event that brings them here to our community. And so we're doing an outreach with Grand Traverse County Drug Free Coalition of North Prevention, and we're getting soap into some of the hotels that have the human sex trafficking phone number on it. So if any are brought into our area, they have a phone number to reach out to.
And you had mentioned, and I had heard before about Mackinac Island. Is that mostly sex trafficking or human trafficking as far as working for little to no money?
That's a really good question. That is more along the lines of labor trafficking up there in Mackinac City. And I'm not sure what the date is, but there was an arrest a number of years back. So, or arrests made. So I think there's been, some change in their business practices up there, but I'm not sure what the status is because Mackinac Island still seems to be the same and it's doing business as usual, but I don't know for sure. But a lot of calls come in from there. So
yeah, I've heard before. We see a lot of people from different countries over there, and they're kind of called in. They're promised all these things to work on this beautiful island, and they get there and they've worked a lot of hours and it's not what they expected, and they don't make the money to just leave and go back home. They can't do that.
Right. And many times, and I know with the immigrants that are working in the cherry industry here in the cherry farms, they are not necessarily, I don't want to speak like this is all of them, but some of them for sure, they don't pay them the first month or two. They don't get paid till the end of the summer. So you can't leave. And many times the sleeping quarters are very tight. And so if they're not getting money to buy food or anything else, they're pretty much repressed. So I know there's a lot going on to kind of help and assist with that to make sure they have the right housing and everything. But definitely that pay scale. I mean, if you don't pay them for 3 months, and it's not really our minimum wage they're getting paid.
Right.
So, yeah, our eyes open to those things more and more as we realize what that looks like. Yeah.
Trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Can you guys hear that? The background
a little
sound?
bit.
I don't know if. Let's see something. Just a second.
Are you trying to get out of there?
No, I did get out of there, but now I can't. Okay, there we go.
Oh.
Yeah, the video was still going. So, let's see. Does anybody else have any other questions? We got
I don't have any questions, but thanks for sharing all that information, Linda. I thought it was good information too that a lot of people should know. I know I lived in Grand Rapids for about 9 years, and it wasn't until the very end before I moved out of there that I was even aware that that was such a hot spot. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to get the word out.
Yeah, I agree.
When I bring my granddaughter down there, I tell her, you know, hang on to my hand. You need to be right here, right next to me.
Now, another important fact is lots of times the trafficker is somebody they know. So even though that can happen where they go missing and stuff like that, the primary is somebody they know. So, but I do think Grand Rapids, because it's also Toledo, Ohio is a really big truck stop, which goes everywhere. So Grand Rapids is a good spot to then cross over and get into Toledo. So, so it is kind of like a moving target kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that, that video really, I don't know how you guys felt, but it's very touching to just see what those scenarios were and how many people and children and young people that's affecting. So the more we can stay on the front end of this and keep it part of the conversation, I feel like the more we can do to bring a stop to it, actually.
So do you have any flyers, anything that can be put out on like our coalition table? Because the two go together.
Yeah, I could. Yes, I've made some up. I had them Tuesday night at the community conversations at the Traverse City Area Library, but I'll make up some more. That's a good thought, Suzanne. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that Antrim County, they have a group as well, because the 131 goes right through Kalkaska and Antrim County all the way up and, you know, up north. So there's a lot of drug trafficking and human trafficking going through there. And you wouldn't think.
Yeah. And the drug trafficking and human trafficking kind of go hand in hand, because they say wherever their drugs is, there's human trafficking. Mm-hmm. So, and so also, like when it's coming across our southern border, and it wasn't too long ago, there was an arrest down in southeast Michigan of 2 illegals that had a bunch of drugs that they brought over, you know, the border to up here. And it wasn't reported, but always what goes in my mind is, I wonder if there's any girls also that we aren't hearing about. In other words, that whole move, they kind of, it's kind of a whole racket together, if you will. Right. Even though there can be isolated arms of it, but yeah.
Yeah, and if you talk to individuals that are struggling with substance use disorder and you hear a lot of their stories, there is trafficking or coercion or whatever behind a lot of it. There's a young lady that I know that was, I don't know what the word you would use for it, but put out at a very, very young age by a family member, you know, for the purpose of getting substances.
Oh, yeah, right, right.
Ever since, because she was quite young and life, you know, and I hear those stories quite a bit, you know, and I hear it from people that, you know, used to have SUD or living in SUD, where they talk about, as I had mentioned to someone about the sex trafficking and drug trafficking were so connected, and they said, oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why as we work and we get together, our whole programs, our interventions, I mean, even finding a safe place is very much like suicide intervention. You know, what's going to make this person safe, and who are the people that they really can trust and be around, and that type of thing. So there's really a whole, it's such a close alignment to what we're all trained in already. Absolutely. That to be able to see this as a piece of it just gives us another avenue where to direct more deeper counsel and consideration. So
I think,
yeah. Well, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to share with all you guys, this information, and I do hope it's very helpful.
Yeah, it absolutely. I think the next thing we really need to work on is housing because we
Yeah.
try to get out of that lifestyle, and it's like they've got no place to go. They've got no safe place to go. And
that's the biggest thing, I think. And yeah, I was so excited about the crisis center, but that's only one step. It's a very, very small step. I think they have 2 weeks there max, but it's something. And then if it can be, moved into residential and where they feel protected and safe and, that somebody's not looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, truly affordable housing, not $1,500 a month.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them actually need like a residential home to be part of a program. Some need to learn to cook. Some need to learn to bake. Some need to get applications out for jobs. I mean, like, where's the resting spot to try to and learn to think different? Because they've been told something all this time. And so now to think different is new for them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Linda. Lots of good information. I'll share this. This will be on our Facebook Live, and I'll share this with the coalition and put it in our newsletter, so more people can watch it.